You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. Never did I fathom that a relic, caked in the dust of ages, would fling open a door onto a landscape of peril and shadowed dealings. Yet, huddled there in the encroaching darkness, the guttural whispers of clandestine traffickers reaching my ears, the truth struck me. Some unearthed wonders are best left entombed. My name is Dr. Ilara Vance. My life's pursuit, the sun-scorched remnants of pharaonic Egypt, the silent language etched in stone. Years I've dedicated to deciphering glyphs, assembling the fragmented narratives of antiquity, but no papyrus scroll, no crumbling stele could have schooled me for the frantic pulse of existence that ignited under the merciless gaze of the sun, deep within the Valley of the Kings. It marked my third season laboring amidst the sands near Luxor. The air itself felt thick, a suffocating blanket woven by the relentless sun, as my team and I meticulously sifted through a stratum ripe with promise. Weeks had bled into one another, yielding familiar comforts, pottery fragments, a glint of corroded bronze, the occasional bead, but nothing to rewrite the annals, until my trowel met unyielding resistance. "Over here!" The exclamation tore from my throat, buoyant with discovery. "I believe I've struck something significant." My colleagues converged, their faces mirroring my anticipation as I delicately swept away the millennia of accumulated earth. Gradually, an outline emerged, compact, wooden, adorned with carvings utterly alien to my experience. "Dr. Vance?" murmured Ben Carter, my assistant, his voice hushed with wonder. "This bears no resemblance to anything catalogued from this era." He spoke the truth. The chest defied the chronological strata we were excavating. It resonated with a deeper past, impossibly ancient, and preserved with an uncanny perfection that defied the desert's decay. My hands, betraying a tremor I couldn't suppress, lifted the coffer from its earthen cradle. It possessed a surprising heft for its modest dimensions. A faint shifting sound emanated from within. "Transport this to the field laboratory," I instructed, cradling it as if it were fragile glass. Comprehensive documentation is paramount before we dare unveil its contents. Within the relative cool of our makeshift lab, the chest became the object of intense scrutiny, photographed, measured, its every angle recorded. The glyphs adorning its surface were a maddening enigma, a tapestry woven from familiar symbols and characters utterly foreign, defying known linguistic keys. It felt tantalizingly close to comprehension, yet pivotal elements remained stubbornly obscure. As twilight painted the vast desert canvas in strokes of amber and violet, the moment arrived. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I cautiously raised the lid. There, nestled upon a bed of fabric resembling time-worn silk, lay several small objects. A scarab beetle wrought from gold, its eyes fashioned from chips of deepest crimson garnet. A cluster of diminutive tools, their precise function lost to time. And, most captivatingly, a collection of papyrus scrolls, preserved with a miraculous integrity. "Astounding," I whispered, reverently unfurling the edge of one scroll. The script upon it was sharp, vivid, as though inscribed only yesterday, not millennia past. This could fundamentally alter our perception of pharaonic civilization. We toiled through the night, the hours dissolving as we catalogued and photographed each artifact. Only in the pre-dawn stillness did exhaustion claim me, sending me stumbling towards my cot, my thoughts a dizzying vortex of the implications this find held. The subsequent days were a whirlwind of fervent research and suppressed excitement. We maintained a strict veil of secrecy, hesitant to alert the press or authorities until the nature of our discovery became clearer. Yet, as I immersed myself further in the translation of the scrolls, a subtle disquiet began to bloom. The texts spoke not just of history, but of clandestine temples, of rituals invoking inexplicable powers, and more ominously, of a clandestine fraternity sworn to safeguard these very secrets through any means necessary. The fifth night following the unearthing marked a descent into shadow. I was sequestered late in the lab, wrestling with a particularly convoluted passage, when muffled voices disturbed the silence outside. Sharp, urgent whispers laced with menace. Compelled by a mixture of curiosity and unease, I crept towards the window, peering through a sliver in the canvas flap. The sight froze the blood in my veins. Two figures, cloaked in darkness, confronted one of our local laborers. Their words remained indistinct, but the aggressive posture, the tension coiling in the air, spoke volumes. I watched, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, as something, currency surely, was pressed into the worker's hand before the figures dissolved back into the desert night. Sleep became an elusive quarry that night. Who were they? What was their objective? A desperate part of me wished it unconnected to our find, but a deeper instinct screamed otherwise. The following morning, I drew Ben aside. "We must exercise extreme caution," I conveyed, recounting the previous night's encounter. "I suspect someone is actively pursuing these artifacts." Ben's complexion turned ashen. "Gods! What's our course of action? Should we involve the Antiquities Police?" I shook my head, the uncertainty gnawing at me. "Not yet. We lack knowledge of who can be trusted. For the interim, maintain absolute security. No one approaches the artifacts without my direct presence." Despite our heightened vigilance, the atmosphere permeating the dig site shifted palpably. I felt unseen gazes tracking my movements. Conversations ceased abruptly upon my approach. Then began the disappearances. Minor items initially, a field notebook, a specialized brush, yet sufficient to fray my nerves raw. The breaking point arrived a week later. Once more I found myself working late, absorbed in deciphering a scroll passage that seemed deliberately obfuscated. The lab was enveloped in silence. The rest of the team had long since retired. A sudden noise outside, furtive footsteps struggling for stealth in the profound quiet, jolted me upright. Instinctively, I extinguished my lamp and plunged behind a substantial supply crate, my heart battering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The door groaned open. Two silhouettes slipped through the aperture, their features swallowed by the gloom. They moved with unnerving precision, heading directly towards the reinforced safe housing the artifacts. "Make haste," one hissed, the sound slicing through the stillness. We must conclude this before our presence is detected." Paralyzed by a chilling dread, I observed as they bypassed the lock with practiced skill, extracting the ancient box and its invaluable contents. Their movements were swift, efficient, transferring everything into a waiting backpack. A sound must have escaped me. An involuntary gasp, the subtle shift of my weight. For one figure spun around abruptly, his gaze piercing the shadows where I concealed myself. "There's someone here," he snarled. Hesitation was a luxury I couldn't afford. I erupted from my hiding place, sending instruments clattering in my desperate scramble for the exit. Behind me, urgent shouts erupted, followed by the unmistakable thud of pursuit. I fled into the embrace of the night, the cool desert air a stark contrast to the heat of my panic. No plan formulated in my mind, no destination considered, only the primal urge to escape, to somehow shield the knowledge we had unearthed. How long I ran, I cannot say. My lungs burned, muscles screamed in protest, but terror was a relentless goad. Eventually, I stumbled into a small cluster of acacia trees, a miniature sanctuary in the vast emptiness. Collapsing behind a weathered boulder, I fought to regain my breath, my mind racing. What recourse did I have? Whom could I possibly trust? As if summoned by my silent plea, the low growl of an approaching engine reached my ears. Peeking cautiously from my refuge, I saw a jeep skid to a halt nearby. Ben leaped out, his expression frantic. "Dr. Vance!" he shouted into the darkness. "Are you all right? It's Ben! They know where you are! You're in grave danger!" A wave of profound relief washed over me. I staggered out from behind the rock. "Ben! Thank heavens! They took everything. The artifacts. We must—" The words caught in my throat, strangled by disbelief. Emerging from the passenger side of the jeep were the very men I had witnessed violating the lab. Ben's face crumpled. "Forgive me, Dr. Vance," he uttered, his voice thick with remorse. "They have my family hostage. I had no alternative." Instinctively, I recoiled, my thoughts reeling from the brutal impact of betrayal. But escape was impossible. The men advanced, their faces grim masks. "Dr. Vance?" One addressed me, his tone unexpectedly calm, almost gentle. "We harbor no desire to inflict harm upon you, but you have inadvertently unearthed matters far exceeding your comprehension, matters that demand concealment." "Who are you?" I demanded, striving to inject steel into my trembling voice. "We are custodians of a legacy ancient beyond reckoning," the second man responded. "The artifacts you discovered, they are fragments of something perilous, capable of disrupting the very equilibrium of existence should they fall into profane hands." A hysterical laugh threatened to bubble up. It sounded preposterous, torn from the pages of pulp fiction. Yet the profound seriousness etched in their eyes, the way Ben steadfastly avoided my gaze, it coalesced into a terrifying, undeniable logic. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The first man released a slow sigh. "Presently, you face a decision. Accompany us, learn the unvarnished truth of your discovery, and aid us in its protection. Or—" His voice trailed off, the unspoken alternative hanging heavy and cold in the night air. My gaze shifted from Ben's tormented face to the backpack containing the stolen artifacts. then out towards the immense, indifferent desert stretching to the horizon. In that stark moment, the realization dawned. The predictable rhythm of my academic life, the straightforward quest for knowledge. It was irrevocably shattered. Drawing a deep, shuddering breath, I met their gaze. "I will accompany you," I stated, "but I require answers, every single one." A flicker of relief crossed the men's features as they nodded in unison. As they guided me towards the waiting jeep, I cast a final, lingering look towards the distant silhouette of the dig site, the crucible where my former existence had met its end, and this new, precarious chapter had commenced. Driving deeper into the desert night, the enigmatic box secured between us, a chilling question echoed in my mind. In excavating the secrets of the past, had I inadvertently sealed my own destiny? Only the unfolding passage of time held the answer, but one certainty remained. The familiar dusty realm of archaeology would forever be altered in my eyes. The small hours bleed together, and here I find myself, cocooned in my own home, headphones a vice grip, my gut twisting cold around a skein of barely audible whispers. This is my reality now. Second floor, hunched over the mixing console's faint constellation of lights, eyes fixed on the jagged horizon of a waveform scrolling across the monitor. A frantic drum beats against my ribs. A dull pressure blooms behind my skull. The urge to rip the cans from my ears is a physical thing, yet the fear holds me captive. The terror that those threadbare voices might spill out, untethered, into the quiet air of the room itself. But perspective is needed. Let me unravel how this thread began. My house stands sentinel on a quiet lane, adrift in a sea of space. Neighbors aren't adjacent, they're distant lights, a short drive away. This isolation, this buffer of silence, was precisely the allure. Peace. My weekends were earmarked for music, for transforming an ample upstairs bedroom into a sanctuary for sound. Its walls seemed substantial, the structure sound. I clad the interior with basic acoustic foam, installed a heavier door, laid down rugs to swallow stray reverberations, established my digital command center. I lay no claim to professional artistry, but the alchemy of guitar loops, drum patterns, and vocal sketches is a necessary solace. Initially, the rhythm was predictable, comforting. I'd lay down elemental guitar phrases, maybe trace a melody into the digital ether. Then, sinking into my worn swivel chair, headphones donned, I'd listen back, dissecting the captured fragments. Around midnight, the ritual concluded. Power down, silence, sleep. Nothing intruded, nothing felt amiss. Then, roughly 3 months passed, replaying a late-night session yielded an anomaly, a fleeting wisp of sound nestled in the decay of a final guitar chord. A whisper, so faint, so ethereal, I dismissed it as phantom noise. Amp hum, perhaps, or an unshielded cable's complaint. Such artifacts haunt home recordings. It's the nature of the beast. The following day involved a meticulous rerouting of cables, a tightening of connections behind the desk, grounding issues, interference, logical culprits. No reason existed to entertain stranger thoughts. The subsequent weekend, I constructed a simple rhythm track on a sampler, layering a bass line beneath it. Later, immersed in the playback, the whisper surfaced again. This time, it lingered, possessed a subtle pulse, a ghost rhythm shadowing the beat. Not speech, precisely, but a murmur, textured and indistinct. A tremor, feather-light, traced my spine, but I clamped down on the unease. Digital gear, prone to stray signals, radio frequencies bleeding through. I recalled phantom CB chatter infiltrating recordings in a previous, more urban life. Surely this was analogous. Still, certainty demanded action. Online forums became my refuge. Deep dives into shielding techniques, ground loops, preamp gremlins. I bled funds into upgrades, a superior audio interface, pristine cables, a robust power conditioner, an investment in sonic purity, I told myself, in banishing the glitch. The next weekend brought the test. I recorded pure silence, the microphone a lone sentinel in the quiet room. Playback revealed nothing but the room's own breath. Relief washed over me. Faulty gear, exorcised. That fragile piece shattered during my next creative endeavor. An acoustic guitar plugged directly into the interface, tracing a simple chord progression. The recording began clean. Listening back, the track was pristine until the final chord began its slow fade into silence. Then, a cascade of low murmurs bloomed in the void, each pulsing gently, like hushed, repeated phrases spoken just beyond comprehension. My throat constricted. I leaned closer, replaying the section, straining to decipher the unintelligible. Not words, just the shape of them. A prickling heat bloomed behind my eyes. Not tears, but tension manifesting. I scrubbed my face, nudged the headphone volume higher, desperately seeking a mundane explanation. This prompted a call to Sam, a friend whose ears and expertise were professionally honed since our college days. He arrived one Wednesday evening, armed with his own laptop, his own diagnostic tools. We dissected my setup, cables tested, microphones scrutinized, interface settings probed, electrical outlets interrogated. He found no gremlins, no obvious flaws. Hours dissolved into recording test tones, tapping microphones, attempting to provoke the spectral whisper. Nothing. Sam suggested, gently, that perhaps I was mistaking low-level hiss for something more sinister. I didn't argue. If his trained ears found nothing, perhaps it was a phantom of my own perception. He departed near 1 a.m., leaving me feeling faintly foolish. Weeks drifted by, blessedly silent. I began to persuade myself it had been an isolated anomaly, a digital hiccup. Then came a Friday night, the urge to lay down a scratch vocal for a nascent song. Just chords and humming, feeling out a melody. I recorded roughly 4 minutes of raw sound, exploring nascent ideas. The playback froze me. Beneath my own voice, woven into the pauses between phrases, another whisper breathed, a sibilant counterpoint, appearing with uncanny precision in the moments of quiet. My hands began to tremble. I killed the playback instantly. My mouth was dust dry, my chest banded tight. Alone, I sat before the glowing screen, the computer fan's low hum, and my own ragged breath the only sounds. Wiping sweat-slick palms on my jeans, I dared to listen again, jumping to the infected sections. The whispers perfectly occupied the gaps. Over and over I played it, searching for an echo, a processing artifact, my own breath captured strangely. But the timbre, the rhythm, it was utterly alien. Like someone murmuring into a hidden microphone, impossibly near, yet impossibly absent. Sleep that night was a fraught, shallow thing. Each drift towards unconsciousness was punctuated by the memory of that faint murmur. its disturbing synchronicity with my own voice. Doubts swirled. The gear, the house itself, my own auditory perception. Yet the certainty remained. I had heard it. This wasn't imagination. In the daylight hours that followed, I tried to compartmentalize, to rationalize. A quirk of home recording, I insisted silently. Sam's tests, perhaps incomplete, some errant frequency dancing in the walls, but a deep-seated disquiet lingered. Small oddities began to snag my attention. The second floor seemed to hold a persistent chill after dark. The air conditioning, surely, yet it felt wrong. The overhead light in my studio sometimes flickered upon activation. A momentary stutter I now registered with heightened awareness. Houses settle, lights flicker, temperatures shift. I recited these mundane truths like mantras, but the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. One weekend, seeking a different energy, I set up early. Curtains thrown wide, sunlight bathing the room. I recorded guitar tracks, immediate playback revealing clean audio. Relief again. But as midnight approached, an idea sparked, demanding capture. Lights on, headphones clamped tight, I began to play a slow, deliberate sequence of chords. A faint buzz intruded into the headphone mix, causing me to halt. In the sudden silence that followed my stopped fingers, the murmur returned. Brief, perhaps only a second or two, but undeniably present. And close. So close it felt like breath on the back of my neck, a voice inches from my ear. The fine hairs there prickled. I tore off the headphones, spinning in my chair. Empty room. A tremor started in my legs, my pulse a frantic bird against my ribs. Compelled, I hit record again, the red light glowing like a warning eye. My heart hammered as I simply let the digital tape run, trying to regulate my breathing against the rising tide of fear. After a minute steeped in silence, I stopped the recording. Playback confirmed it, a faint whisper at the tail end, seeming to dissolve into the very fabric of the walls. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms. My breathing grew shallow. The fear was no longer a visitor. It was taking root. My recording sessions, once anticipated retreats, became ordeals. Each plugged-in cable, each activated microphone, brought a familiar tightening in my chest, an anticipatory dread, waiting for the soft voice. Each recurrence delivered the same jolt, face flushing hot, throat seizing, a clammy sweat breaking out. I contacted Sam again, relaying the persistent strangeness. He returned, patient but skeptical. Another meticulous examination, monitoring through his own headphones. We recorded tracks together. Silence. He offered gentle ribbing about overwork, stress. I managed a hollow laugh, unwilling to sound truly unhinged. His departure left me once more alone in the sprawling quiet, the murmurs echoing only in my memory, and, I feared, in my recordings. My approach shifted. One night I stayed awake until the deepest hour, 3:00 a.m., letting the recording software run, capturing only the ambient silence, an electronic vigil. For the first hour, nothing but the low-noise floor of the room. Then, abruptly, a soft crackle of static, immediately followed by a low murmur. Quieter this time, almost subliminal, but undeniably there. I froze, watching the waveform spike almost imperceptibly on the monitor. My breath hitched. I stopped the recording, saved the file, heart pounding. Playback confirmed it. Indecipherable, yet chillingly present. Which brings me to now. Late. Headphones clamped on, listening to a loop of recorded silence, too unnerved to create anything new. My legs ache with restless energy, yet I'm pinned to the chair. Palms damp, shoulders rigid knots. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the air ducts is a potential harbinger. The source remains elusive. Gear replaced, cable swapped, expert consultation sought, and finding nothing. No neighbors near enough to bleed through walls. Audio interference is real, I know, but this feels deliberate, targeted, manifesting when I play, when I listen, when I simply leave the microphone open to the night. The pattern is erratic, yet frequent enough to infuse every session with dread. Voicing this feels absurd, like stepping willingly into the pages of a ghost story. I'm just Leo, a man who finds solace in sound, living in chosen isolation. Nothing extraordinary marks my existence. Yet here I sit, besieged by anxiety, haunted by recorded voices no one can explain. A neat solution, a technical fix. I crave it, but find none. My current strategy: persist, keep recording, gather evidence perhaps, though for whom or to what end I cannot say. Maybe another engineer, someone with deeper knowledge, could identify some obscure phenomenon. Or maybe they too would hear it and share this creeping chill. Still sitting, headphones on, muscles taut, scanning the unwavering line on the screen for any telltale flutter. My eyes burn. The whisper hasn't returned in the last 5 minutes, but the waiting is its own form of torment. Sleep feels like a distant country. This refuge, this passion, has become a source of profound unease. I will continue. Monitor the waveforms, investigate every anomaly. But if these voices persist, choices will have to be made. About the setup, the schedule, perhaps even about this house. For now there is only the struggle to breathe evenly, to still the trembling in my hands. The clock face glows, 3:47 a.m. The room is inert, but my heart races, and the dull ache returns to my chest. Part of me screams to shut it all down, retreat into denial. But I can't. The need to understand, to confront this uncanny presence, overrides the fear, even as it keeps me tethered here, sleepless, headphones on, waiting for the next whisper to slice through the silence. Hours bled into the asphalt ribbon, unreeling before Elias, the hypnotic drone of the engine, a counterpoint to the pre-dawn quiet. Interstate signs swam past, spectral markers charting a passage across states swallowed by night. Exhaustion gnawed, demanding respite. A simple pause to unkink limbs coiled tight from driving since twilight dimmed the sky. Not the fluorescent glare of a service plaza, nor the transient bustle of a rest stop, just somewhere still, removed. Then, a modest sign materialized, hinting at a secluded overlook, an unassuming haven. It would suffice. The turnoff descended into a pocket of deeper shadow, spitting him into an expanse of profound emptiness. Vacant parking bays sprawled under the indifferent gaze of a few sodium lamps, their sickly orange glow bleeding feebly against the oppressive dark, carving out islands of murky visibility in a sea of black. Elias navigated his car beneath one sputtering beacon, craving its meager luminescence, and cut the engine. Silence rushed in, thick and immediate. He pushed the door open, the hinges groaning a complaint into the stillness, and unfolded himself into the biting air. A viscous chill, damp and penetrating, clung instantly to his skin. He stretched, arms reaching for the starless void. vertebrae cracking a sharp report in the quiet. He'd barely savored the release when he registered her presence. A figure motionless at the precise demarcation between lamplight and impenetrable shadow. Hooded, indistinct, she stood with an ossified stillness facing him. Details remained elusive, lost in the gloom, save for the glint of eyes, small dark pools reflecting the weak light, fixed on him with unnerving steadiness. "Everything all right?" Elias ventured, his voice unnaturally loud, attempting a casual tone that felt brittle. No reply, not a twitch, not a shift in posture, just the unwavering stare from the threshold of darkness. A prickle, cold and sharp, traced its way up his spine. He rationalized, lost, perhaps, awaiting a ride. Yet the utter lack of response, the sheer presence of her silence, twisted a knot low in his gut. Hesitantly, Elias took a tentative step forward, thinking proximity might coax a word. But as his foot landed, she mirrored the movement in reverse, receding fluidly into the encompassing shadows. One moment there, the next absorbed, leaving no trace. Vanished. He remained rooted, a flicker of concern warring with a rising tide of apprehension. Investigate? A primal instinct screamed caution, a visceral sense that the situation had veered sharply from the mundane. Seconds stretched, measured by the low hum of the lamps. Retreat seemed the only sane option. He turned back towards the car, hand outstretched for the familiar cold metal of the door handle. That's when he heard it, a susurrus on the edge of hearing, fragile as moth wings. "Help me." His hand froze mid-air. The sound, faint yet distinct, emanated from the Stygian blackness that had claimed the woman. He pivoted, eyes straining, peering into the void where she had dissolved. Nothing. Only the velvet drape of night, stretching infinitely beyond the light's frail perimeter. "Hello?" the query echoed, swallowed by the vast silence. "Are you hurt?" Stillness answered, profound and absolute, punctuated only by the electric thrum overhead. Torn, Elias wrestled with himself. Prudence urged flight, a swift return to the anonymous safety of the highway. Yet that whispered plea, imbued with a desperate vulnerability, snagged at something within him. Another step, cautious, towards the shadowed verge. Then one more. "Do you need assistance?" He tried again, his voice barely more than a breath, held captive by the cold air. Without warning, without a whisper of sound or motion betraying her approach, she materialized back into the light's periphery, scarcely an arm's length away. She was simply there. Her face, now visible, possessed a lunar pallor, nearly gray, taut over sharp bones. Her eyes, sunken and dark, seemed like hollow sockets, yet they drilled into him with an intensity that felt like ice shards against his skin. "Help me," she breathed again, the sound softer now, disturbingly childlike. Elias recoiled instinctively, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. "Are you lost? Should I call someone for you?" The questions tumbled out, ragged. She offered no verbal reply, only that unwavering, hollow-eyed stare, her mouth slightly agape. The chill radiating from her seemed to seep into his bones. His hands began to tremble uncontrollably. The tableau screamed distress, yet an undercurrent, something profoundly wrong in her gaze, broadcasted a silent warning. "Keep back." "I have a phone," he stammered, voice shaking. "I can make a call." For a fleeting instant, her gaze flickered, a momentary break in the unnerving focus. before she executed a slow, almost mechanical shake of her head. But her eyes, dark and empty, snapped back to his, refusing to release him. "Can you take me?" The whisper was so faint, so ethereal, it might have been the wind sighing through unseen pines. "Take you? Where?" Elias barely managed the words, his throat constricted. Silence was her reply. Instead, a hand lifted towards him, emerging from the folds of her covering. Fingers, pale and exquisitely thin, trembled slightly, appearing almost skeletal in the jaundiced light. Elias stumbled back another pace, raw panic clawing at his insides, every nerve ending shrieking for escape. Yet he was transfixed, pinned by her desolate gaze, unable to break away. She glided a step closer, her hand remaining outstretched, an offering or a threat. Cold perspiration trickled down his neck, his body locked, rigid with dread. Her stare deepened, seeming to penetrate beyond flesh and bone, probing something hidden within him, something he desperately wanted kept unseen. Then, abruptly, as she had appeared, she halted. The extended hand fell limp to her side, her head bowed, shoulders slumping in a gesture of utter weariness, and she retreated, melting once more into the welcoming embrace of the shadows. Gone again. Elias stood frozen, gasping for air, his pulse a frantic drum against the sudden silence. The encounter felt fragmented, hallucinatory. Who was she? What did she want? The questions swirled, unanswered, eclipsed by the overwhelming, undeniable imperative. Leave. Now. He spun towards the car, fumbling for the door latch with trembling fingers. Just as his hand closed around the cold metal, he felt it. An impossible pressure on his shoulder. Cold, damp, clinging. He stopped breathing, heart seizing, every muscle tensing. "Don't leave," rasped a voice, impossibly close, her breath ghosting against the skin of his neck. He whirled around, a strangled cry caught in his throat. Nothing. Only the deserted tarmac, the buzzing lamps casting their lonely circles, and the infinite, waiting darkness. He didn't hesitate. He wrenched the car door open, threw himself inside, slammed it shut. The click of the locks felt like a prayer answered. Hands shaking violently, he gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. His gaze darted wildly around the empty lot, scanning the shadows, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing stirred. The engine roared to life, shattering the quiet. He jammed the gear shift into reverse, tires spitting gravel, then swung the car around, accelerating out of the overlook, eyes glued to the road ahead, refusing the urge to look back. Miles devoured the highway behind him. Compulsively, his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, half expecting to find her face reflected there, pale and staring. Only empty darkness pursued him. He didn't dare stop until the familiar, garish lights of a 24-hour gas station bloomed ahead, a beacon of mundane reality. He pulled in, engine idling, hands still trembling, the encounter replaying itself with chilling clarity. He couldn't explain what he'd witnessed, couldn't comprehend her nature or her need, but one certainty settled deep in his bones, cold and absolute. That forsaken rest area was a place he would never, ever revisit. The Ferris wheel shrieked into motion, a metallic keen against the night's stillness. Rusted joints protested the sudden animation, lifting the gondola where I huddled, a cold bloom of terror unfurling in my gut. This ascent wasn't my doing. Someone else haunted the skeletal remains of Dreamland Acres, and they knew precisely where I'd sought refuge. My name is Elias. For half a year, the graveyard shift at this defunct amusement park has been my domain. Not a calling, merely a way to keep the lights on. Yet there's a desolate allure to Dreamland Acres after dark. The rides stand like silent monoliths. Paint peels like sunburnt skin. Pathways echo only with memory. A forgotten kingdom slumbering under the moon. Usually, my nocturnal dramas involved routing teenage ghost hunters. Tonight felt fractured, different. The shift began predictably. Dusk bled across the sky as I relieved the day man. The familiar ritual of clocking in, the long night stretching ahead, filled with quiet patrols and the dry shuffle of paperwork. Hours slipped by, measured only by the sweep of my flashlight beam. Around the stroke of midnight, during my second circuit, the first discordant note sounded. A flicker, peripheral, phantom quick. I snapped my head around, light stabbing the gloom, finding only the hulking, quiescent shapes of forgotten amusements. Just the park settling, I told myself. Rats in the walls, wind in the wires, but the explanation felt thin, insufficient. A prickling awareness crawled up my spine, the distinct sensation of being observed. As I pressed on, the feeling intensified, thickening the air. Shadows pooled deep and suggestive, every groan of aged timber a footfall, every sigh of wind a whispered threat. My pace quickened unconsciously, fingers brushing the reassuring weight of the taser on my hip. Near the skeletal remains of the carousel, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, a sound sliced through the silence. Laughter, thin and unhinged, skittering across the empty plaza. I spun, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Identify yourself! My voice, meant to be firm, wavered. This is private property. Only silence answered, heavy and watchful. Then the laughter erupted again, closer this time, seeming to ricochet off the dilapidated funhouse facade. A cruel game of echoes, a predator playing with its quarry. I fumbled for my radio, desperation clawing at me. Static hissed back, mocking my attempt. My mobile? A dead screen, devoid of bars, utterly alone. Against every instinct screaming retreat, I moved towards the sound. The laughter, intermittent now, drew me deeper into the park's decaying heart, past boarded-up concession stands hawking phantom popcorn, towards the colossal, black-limbed silhouette of the Ferris wheel. My flashlight beam, trembling in my grasp, landed on the wheel's control booth. The panel door hung open, a nest of severed wires spilling out like entrails, tampered with, deliberately. Before the implication could fully register, a scuff of gravel sounded behind me. I whirled, flashlight slicing empty air, but the sound wasn't singular. It multiplied, footsteps closing in, seemingly from everywhere at once. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. Instinct took over. I scrambled for the nearest cover, an open Ferris wheel gondola, hauling myself inside, sinking low, breath sawing in my throat. The footsteps converged, grew louder, then abruptly ceased. Silence descended again, broken only by the frantic thudding in my own chest. And then, with a gut-wrenching lurch, the great wheel began to turn. Ironclad dread gripped me as the gondola swung upwards, lifting me into the suffocating darkness. Whoever stalked these grounds wasn't just present, they were orchestrating this, relishing my helplessness. At the apex of the rotation, the machinery groaned to a halt, leaving me suspended, a solitary figure pinned against the night sky, exposed and vulnerable. From this unnerving perch, I saw them, not one, but several figures slinking through the shadows below, fanning out, methodically sealing off any path to freedom. My thoughts raced, disjointed. Who were they? What purpose did this serve? Fragments surfaced, strange late-night deliveries, sections of the park declared inexplicably off-limits, equipment vanishing, power failures. Had it all been building towards this night? A voice, amplified, distorted, boomed from the ground. "Enjoying the perspective, Elias? Welcome to tonight's main attraction." I knew that voice, stripped of its usual daytime bonhomie. Corbin. Day shift. Why? "Corbin, what the hell is this?" I yelled back, fighting to keep the tremor from my voice. "What's going on?" A wave of derisive laughter washed up from below. "Oh, Elias," Corbin's voice dripped false pity. "You truly don't grasp it, do you? You thought Dreamland Acres was just rotting timber and faded memories? That your job was keeping kids with spray cans out?" My mind struggled to connect the pieces. "This park," he continued, his voice hardening, "rests on something valuable, something certain people pay handsomely to move discreetly. And you, Elias, you've been the perfect unwitting watchdog, scaring off anyone who might stumble onto our little enterprise." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The hushed shipments, the restricted zones. This derelict playground was a facade, a cover for illicit dealings. Narcotics? Weapons? The specifics didn't matter. What mattered was the chilling certainty that, having glimpsed behind the curtain, I wasn't intended to see daylight. "Now," Corbin's voice echoed, laced with sinister amusement. "A simple bullet would be efficient, but terribly dull. We've arranged a bit of sport for you, Elias. Survive our games. Prove your resourcefulness. Perhaps there's a place for you. Fail. Well, these old parks are tragically prone to accidents. Wouldn't you agree?" The Ferris wheel shuddered, beginning its slow descent. The moment the gondola was near enough, I launched myself out, knees jarring violently as I hit the packed earth. Immediately, the sounds of pursuit erupted. Pounding feet, renewed laughter echoing through the skeletal structures. They were coming. What followed blurred into a nightmare marathon. The entire park became a death trap, a perversion of its intended joy. Rides sprang malevolently to life as I darted past, gears grinding, metal arms swinging with crushing force. Tripwires, nearly invisible in the gloom, sent me sprawling, inches from rusted metal shards protruding from the ground like broken teeth. I blundered into the disorienting geometry of the Hall of Mirrors, pursued by fractured reflections, unable to discern illusion from attacker. Yet I possessed one advantage they hadn't factored: intimacy bred from 6 months of solitary, nocturnal wandering. Every shortcut, every shadowed alcove, every maintenance passage was etched into my mental map. I exploited this knowledge relentlessly, doubling back, using the park's decaying infrastructure to weave and evade, momentarily confounding them. Through the long hours, I felt their pursuit shift from confident sport to frustrated rage. Their taunts grew sharper, their traps more desperate, more crudely implemented. I managed, through sheer luck and adrenaline, to turn one of their own snares back on them, the satisfying yelp of pain, a fleeting victory in the oppressive darkness. Finally, miraculously, the black sky began to soften, paling towards the east. Dawn was approaching. I saw it, the perimeter fence, a lattice of corroded hope. Behind me, I heard them closing the distance, Corbin's voice raw, barking orders. Fueled by the last dregs of terror and adrenaline, I clawed my way up the fence, rust biting into my palms. I tumbled over the top, collapsing onto the scrubby verge outside just as they slammed against the wire mesh. Corbin's face, twisted into a mask of fury, was the final image burned into my mind as I scrambled towards the distant ribbon of the highway. I must have looked like a wraith, torn clothes, wild eyes, bleeding hands, when I flagged down the first pair of headlights. An elderly couple, initially hesitant, saw the raw panic in my eyes and unlocked their doors. They drove me directly to the nearest police station. The ensuing days were a maelstrom. Debriefings, federal agents, flashing cameras. Dreamland Acres, it transpired, had been the hub of a significant narcotics trafficking ring. Corbin and his associates were apprehended, along with corrupted officials who had facilitated the operation. Suddenly, I was a reluctant hero, offered accolades I didn't want. All I could process was the stark proximity of death, the chilling transformation of a mundane job into a primal struggle for survival within that decaying amusement park. Now I advise on security systems, designing measures to prevent the kind of infiltration that nearly cost me my life. But Dreamland Acres lingers. Sleep often returns me to that Ferris wheel gondola, suspended high above a playground built of shadows and fear. I replay that night, wondering about the timing of the sunrise, the thin margin between escape and oblivion. One truth remains indelible. I can never again view an amusement park's cheerful facade without seeing the potential for darkness lurking just beneath the surface, waiting patiently for nightfall, for the real games to begin. A rifle's crack fractured the woodland calm, an eruption that sent birds vaulting skyward like shrapnel. The second report slammed into the pine beside me. Bark sprayed my cheek. In that splintered instant, the truth pierced through. This wasn't mere illicit hunting. I was the quarry. Ilara. For half a decade, that name belonged to the Viridian Expanse as much as the ancient trees. A steward, a guardian. Roles I cherished, woven into the fabric of sun-dappled trails and the quiet lives sheltered within. Yet no manual, no simulation could steal a soul for that particular descent into chaos. The day commenced under the guise of normalcy, a routine circuit through the northern reaches where whispers of poaching had lately disturbed the peace. A profound hush lay upon the woods, the air sharp with autumn's nascent breath. I recall the slant of light, molten gold through the turning foliage, a transient masterpiece. Deeper within the green labyrinth, dissonant notes emerged. Branches unnaturally snapped, the understory bruised, impressions alien to the usual tread of wildlife. Intuition, a primal hum beneath my ribs, insisted something was profoundly awry. Still, duty beckoned me onward. Then a glint, incongruous metal nestled in the fern's embrace. My approach was measured, breath held captive. parting the fronds revealed not just a trap, but a brutal engine of capture, a heavy-gauge snare illegally wrought, potent enough for the largest denizens of this domain. This transcended petty opportunism. It spoke of calculation, of a chilling proficiency. My fingers found the radio, relaying the discovery, requesting support. Mid-transmission, indistinct murmurs drifted through the trees. Silence. I severed the connection, unwilling to betray my position. Melting into the undergrowth, I ghosted towards the sound. Two figures materialized, swathed in disruptive patterns, cradling rifles whose sleek lethality seemed an affront to the woods. Their low exchange confirmed my rising dread. This was no haphazard foray, but a structured, ruthless enterprise. Proof. I needed undeniable proof. My hand retrieved the compact camera, its lens a silent witness I hoped to deploy. Framing their faces, their armaments, I depressed the shutter. The mechanism's faint click resonated like a thunderclap in the stillness. Two heads snapped towards me, rifles instantly finding their shoulders. I became stone, a desperate prayer forming unspoken. A silent gesture passed between them, a predator's accord, and then, deliberately, they advanced. Escape was the only imperative. Retreating, cautious step by cautious step, proved futile. A desiccated twig betrayed me, its brittle snap echoing like a verdict. "There!" The shout ripped the air, immediately followed by the rifle's sharp retort. The first shot. I didn't pause to analyze intent. Instinct propelled me into a frantic flight. Foliage lashed my face as I plunged through the tangled green, a desperate surge against the wilderness. Behind, their calls, their pursuit, a growing thunder. The second bullet chewed bark inches away, stark confirmation of their lethal aim. I fled with a velocity born of terror, lungs scorching, limbs turned to anchors, yet fear was a relentless goad. This terrain, my terrain, was the sole advantage I possessed. Thoughts fractured, coalescing into a desperate strategy. The caves. Miles lay between me and the nearest station, the radio dead in this deep fold of the earth. Solitude was absolute. I broke from the semblance of a path, angling towards a known network of subterranean passages. The gurgle of water reached me, a promise. Hope, sharp and sudden, flared. The caves lay just past the watercourse. Erupting from the tree line, my brief surge of hope guttered. Recent downpours had transformed the familiar, placid stream into a churning brown fury. A moment's hesitation gripped me. To enter that torrent courted disaster, but the pursuers' voices, drawing closer, annulled all choice. The risk was unavoidable. The water's glacial shock stole my breath, its velocity far exceeding expectation. I fought the relentless current, boots finding treacherous purchase on slick stones. Midstream, equilibrium vanished, the world inverted. I was submerged, tossed within the rapids' violent embrace. Clawing towards the light, I broke surface, lungs desperate for air. Through a watery veil, the dark maw of the cave rushed towards me. A final, convulsive effort. Fingers locked onto an outcrop, hauling my sodden weight from the torrent. I sprawled onto the cave floor, a wreck of shivers and choked coughs. Rest was a luxury denied. Shouts echoed from the opposite bank. They hadn't faltered. Staggering upright, I plunged into the cave's absolute blackness, swallowed whole. Hands became eyes, tracing the cold, rough-hewn walls. Behind me, The distinct sound of splashing, they were crossing. Urgency lent speed, ignoring the sting of unseen collisions. The passage coiled, bifurcated, a subterranean maze. I chose paths at random, praying for disorientation to claim my hunters. Minutes, or perhaps an eternity later, I stumbled into a cramped chamber. Anemic light filtered through a fissure high above, revealing a space barely sufficient for concealment. I jammed myself into a narrow cleft, striving to muffle the frantic rhythm of my own breath, and waited. Time elongated into an elastic torment. Their movements resonated through the stone, disembodied voices amplified by the acoustics, sometimes distant whispers, sometimes terrifyingly immediate. "Got to be in here somewhere," one growled, the sound unnervingly proximate. "No witnesses," the other voice, tight with tension. "Chief'll skin us if this goes sideways." I shrank deeper into the rock, breath suspended. A torch beam sliced across the chamber, momentarily illuminating my refuge. Certainty of discovery clenched my heart. But the light swept past, their receding voices swallowed by another tunnel's dark throat. How long I remained entombed in fear, I cannot say. It felt epochal. Eventually, a profound silence descended upon the caverns, yet I lingered, paralyzed by the possibility of subterfuge. Only when the meager light from the fissure began to wane, signaling twilight's approach, did I hazard movement. Every fiber protested as I unfolded from the crevice. With painstaking slowness, I navigated the labyrinthine return. Emerging, I found the forest bathed in the lambent gold of sunset, utterly still. No sign of the men. Against all odds, I had endured. On trembling limbs, I began the arduous trek towards the station. Full darkness had claimed the woods by the time I staggered clear. Surely a spectre returned from some harrowing ordeal. Drenched, caked in earth, scored by branches, eyes wide with exhaustion and residual terror. My colleagues reacted with stunned disbelief as I erupted into the station, words tumbling out in a torrent of armed pursuers and a desperate flight. A search party had been imminent, their concern mounting with my prolonged absence. The subsequent days dissolved into a haze of official reports, meticulous Park Service inquiries, my own fractured recounting. Investigators unearthed corroborating evidence, secreted weapon caches, more snares, even a rudimentary processing site concealed deep within the expanse. But the hunters themselves, they had evaporated, leaving no trace. In the ensuing weeks, a battle raged within. The Viridian expanse, once my solace, now felt laced with menace. Every shifting shadow seemed poised to coalesce into threat. Each unexpected snap of a twig sent adrenaline searing through me. Yet gradually, insidiously, fear began to transmute into resolve. These men had violated this sacred space, endangered the creatures entrusted to my care, and sought my life to preserve their secrets. I refused to grant them victory by succumbing to fear. I returned to my duties, senses honed to an unnerving sharpness. I shared my experience, informing new training, refining safety measures, enhancing our lines of communication. At times, patrolling, my gaze still sweeps the tree line with hypervigilance, half expecting camouflaged figures to detach themselves from the dappled shade. The crackle of dry leaves can still jolt my heart, but then, the sight of elk grazing undisturbed in a clearing, or the fluid dance of river otters, reaffirms the purpose. This wilderness remains my charge, my sanctuary to defend. That is the essence of being a ranger, standing sentinel between the wild heart of the world and those who would plunder it, regardless of the price. So, should your path ever lead you through the Viridian expanse, and you observe a ranger whose gaze lingers perhaps too intently on the dense thicket, whose stillness seems charged with uncommon alertness, it might be me. My search extends beyond lost wanderers or minor infractions now. I scan for the unnatural stillness in the woods, for the alien gleam where only leaf and loam should lie. For I learned firsthand that the most formidable predators within these trees sometimes wear boots, and I will not suffer them to stalk my sanctuary again. Even now, the memory surfaces unbidden. That first serpentine exhalation of sound, slicing through the dead hours past midnight. Streetlights, hemorrhaging yellow onto the asphalt, sputtered like dying embers. I was adrift, walking back from Leo's place, mind blessedly vacant, until I drew level with the skeletal remains of the city transit depot. Mothballed years ago, a casualty of fiscal hemorrhage or some bureaucratic wrangling, it slumped behind a perimeter of chain link, festooned with keep out placards ignored by time and taggers, a husk, silent and lightless. Or so I thought until that particular night. A protracted, metallic groan scraped the air, unnervingly reminiscent of air brakes protesting under duress at route's end. My head snapped around, scanning the desolate street for the twin stars of headlamps, the ruby glow of taillights. Nothing stirred. Emptiness reigned. No vehicles, no pedestrians, only the phantom resonance of that pneumatic sigh fading into the urban quiet. A knot of ice formed low in my belly, incongruous against the mild autumn air. My fingers began to tremble. Absurd, I chided myself. A trick of the acoustics, nothing more. I forced my legs onward, wrestled my thoughts towards mundanity, yet an unsettling conviction lingered. An unseen presence had brushed against the edge of my world. For several nights thereafter, I charted a new course homeward, deliberately circumventing that forsaken block and its ghostly acoustics. But the void left by the unanswered question gnawed at me. Curiosity, that insidious motivator, eventually overruled caution. Why? Perhaps to exorcise the burgeoning fear, to affirm my own sanity. And so, I found myself retracing my steps, same ungodly hour, same route, positioning myself across the street where the pavement crumbled at the depot's boundary. It sat unchanged, windows like vacant eye sockets, schedule displays shredded like old flags, rows of waiting benches layered thick with the sediment of neglect. I stood, sentinel, listening to the frantic percussion of my own pulse, waiting. 10 minutes bled into 15. The silence pressed in, amplifying the rhythm of my breathing, the self-deprecating voice insisting this was folly. Then, a sharp, sibilant hiss, like compressed air venting. It began as a whisper, swelling in volume. My heart vaulted against my ribs. Again I swept the street left, then right, devoid of life, of light. The blood thundered in my ears. That's when I perceived it. A fleeting luminescence deep within the depot's grounds. Too frail for a proper headlight, it was more akin to the guttering spark of a failing torch, emanating from the vicinity of the old bus lanes behind the fence. Tentatively, I edged closer, gaze fixed on the spot. The light pulsed again, a weak semaphore in the gloom. Another hiss followed, longer this time. Sweat slicked my palms, my throat constricted. The conjunction of sound and light conjured an insistent image, a spectral omnibus hidden just beyond sight, attempting to complete its final spectral run. Yet my eyes registered only the fractured driveway, the scatter of broken glass, the profound emptiness. I pivoted, retreating homeward, my mind a frantic loom weaving threads of fear and disbelief. Sleep, when it came, was shallow, leaving me drenched and shivering before dawn. The following day, I recounted the experience to Marco, a colleague. He offered a dismissive chuckle, attributing it to an overtaxed imagination. Perhaps he was right, yet the sensation, the certainty, refused to dissipate. The abandoned depot became a locus of morbid fascination. My evenings developed a new compulsive rhythm. Finish work, swallow a hasty meal, then gravitate towards that derelict structure. Each pilgrimage yielded the same result. The hiss, sometimes curt, sometimes drawn out and mournful. Occasionally, the ephemeral flash of light. One night, through a jagged pane of glass near the station's far corner, I swore I glimpsed a fleeting silhouette, a suggestion of form that vanished as quickly as it appeared. It felt like being watched. A primal instinct screamed at me to desist, to abandon this nocturnal vigil. But the compulsion was stronger, an insatiable need to unravel the enigma. I began circumnavigating the perimeter fence, probing for weaknesses. The main gate remained steadfast, its chain thick with rust. The fence itself, topped with cruel loops of barbed wire, offered no easy purchase, though I found sections where the mesh sagged, hinting at past attempts. The building's facade was stained and grim. Mostly, the interior remained swallowed by darkness, but sometimes a single fluorescent tube deep within would flicker erratically, a ghostly pulse of defiance against the supposed utility cut-off years prior. It made no earthly sense. One evening, the air itself felt charged, heavy with unspoken imminence. An overcast sky muted the already feeble streetlights. Standing near the fence, scanning the blighted lot, I heard it. The hiss, so immediate, so loud, it felt as if it originated directly behind me. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. My chest tightened. A primal urge to flee warred with a strange paralysis in my limbs. Then, a flicker erupted on the far side, near the bus bays. Not faint this time, but a frantic, strobing pulse. Drawn despite myself, I approached the main gate, grasping the cold metal, rattling it futilely. Locked fast, peering through the diamond gaps, my eyes strained against the shadows, and perceived something. An outline, vast and indistinct, where a bus might logically rest. It was a mere density in the darkness, yet undeniably large, too monolithic for a car or van. I blinked, trying to dispel the illusion. The shape remained static for perhaps 2 minutes, a silent behemoth in the gloom. Then, abruptly, it dissolved, as if a switch had been thrown. The lot plunged back into near-total darkness, save for one sputtering bulb near a service door. A grating noise followed, metal dragging across concrete. That was my cue. Reason finally asserted itself. I backed away, then turned, my walk accelerating into a near run, not stopping until I reached the relative sanctuary of a better-lit avenue, pulse erratic, skin clammy with cold sweat. Home. Lock the door. Forget. But the forgetting wouldn't take. The next day found me back, pulled by an invisible tether, an itch demanding to be scratched. I maintained a greater distance this time, observing from halfway down the block. The street slumbered. a pair of feral cats scavenged near a shuttered diner. The loudest sound was my own respiration, and then, cleaving the quiet, the hiss. Simultaneously, a dull luminescence bloomed on the ground near the station's main entrance, pulsed twice, and died. Adrenaline surged, hot and sharp. My mouth went dry. The depot wasn't just there, it felt sentient, beckoning. Weeks dissolved into a routine of unease. Fresh graffiti appeared on the depot walls, stark, angular symbols I didn't recognize, slashed in angry colors. New constellations of shattered glass glittered on the tarmac. Occasionally, faint impressions, like footprints, marked the dust leading towards the spectral waiting area, though I never witnessed anyone enter or leave. I mentioned the lights and sounds again, this time to Julian. He suggested vagrants, squatters messing with residual equipment, but the phenomenon felt too deliberate, too unnervingly punctual. The hiss arrived each night within minutes of the same time, its duration consistent, invariably accompanied by that fleeting light. This wasn't random, it felt orchestrated, like a phantom schedule meticulously observed. One night, emboldened by a perverse courage, I brought a compact torch. Perhaps its beam could pierce the gloom, reveal more through the fractured windows. My hand trembled as I approached the fence line, phone poised to capture evidence. I waited, breath held, for the signal. Minutes stretched, then the familiar pneumatic sigh. I thumbed the torch on, directing its narrow beam through a sizable rent in the chain link. It swept across a desolate interior. Ticket counters shrouded in dust and cobwebs, the floor littered with chunks of fallen plaster. Then the light snagged on something metallic in the far corner, the unmistakable front grille of an old coach, rusted and bearing the scars of impacts. For an instant, I thought I saw the dull gleam of headlamps reflecting my light, but they were opaque, lifeless, like painted eyes. I shifted the beam slightly, tracing the flank of the unseen vehicle. Through a shattered pane on the bus itself, I registered a shape slumped in a seat, motionless, a silhouette devoid of detail. My breath hitched, the torch beam jittered, betraying the tremor in my hand. A sharp click, like a circuit breaking, echoed nearby. My torch died. I fumbled with the switch, useless. My phone screen flickered, the battery icon flashing critically low, though it had been near 70% when I left home. As I instinctively recoiled, the light deep within the station erupted in a violent, strobing frenzy. A fluorescent tube, perhaps, spasming in its death throes, casting lunatic shadows that danced and leaped. My stomach clenched. My heart felt like a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. Then, as suddenly as it began, the internal flashing ceased. Utter darkness resumed. A low scraping sound followed, chillingly like heavy tires turning slowly on concrete. My nerves shattered. I fled, not daring to look back. This harrowing pattern persisted. Each visit ratcheted up the tension, my body perpetually braced for something. Sleep became a luxury, my nights haunted by recurring images. The seated silhouette, the corroded grille, the epileptic lights. Was I losing my grip? Yet the visceral reality of the encounters felt undeniable. It was there. One evening, approaching from a different vector, I discovered a narrow service alley flanking the depot. It offered a new perspective. Halfway down, a rusted metal side door hung askew on its hinges, clearly forced. A jolt, electric and terrifying, shot through me. This was it, a way in. my chest constricted, leg muscles taut with apprehension, but I moved forward. A furtive glance confirmed the street was empty. I slipped into the alley's fetid embrace. The acrid stench of old urine and decay assaulted my senses. Covering my mouth with my sleeve, I navigated past splintered pallets. The breached door opened onto a cramped corridor, likely once used by staff. Darkness reigned, the floor a treacherous landscape of broken glass and crumbled plaster. My phone's torch, set to its lowest intensity, cast a feeble pool of light. Each step crunched, amplifying my intrusion. My own breathing sounded unnaturally loud. At the corridor's end, another door stood partially ajar, offering a glimpse into the main terminal. The desolate vista of bolted plastic seats, many fractured, greeted me. A toppled vending machine lay like a fallen monument. The air hung thick and stale, the scent of time itself decaying. I edged closer, sweeping the weak beam across the cavernous space. My heart pounded a frantic tattoo against my sternum. And then, the hiss, close, immediately to my left. I jerked the phone light around, illuminating a dark, curved stain on the concrete floor, unmistakably a tire track leading from deeper within the station, perhaps from a maintenance bay, accessed via a corridor branching off to the left. The hiss repeated, wetter this time, like air escaping a punctured line. Trembling, I advanced, compelled to follow the sound past rows of dented lockers and a faded employees-only sign. Beyond this passage lay a wide set of rolling metal doors, the kind that admit vehicles. They were partially raised, hovering perhaps 3 feet above the ground. Crouching, I aimed my phone's beam into the gap. Wheels, thick, coated in decades of grime, undeniably belonging to a bus long thought defunct. I strained to see more, contorting my body, but the aperture was too restrictive. My pulse hammered in my temples. Sweat traced cold paths down my face. The hiss sounded again, accompanied by a brief, anemic flicker of light from beneath the unseen chassis, casting fleeting skeletal shadows from the massive tires. I was frozen, staring, my chest so tight it ached. Then, one of the colossal wheels shifted. Barely an inch, but it was definite movement. A dull thud resonated from within, followed by profound silence. The flicker beneath winked out. My phone, set to silent, began vibrating violently in my hand. The screen went black, then flared back to life, showing a battery level of 5%. It had been nearly full moments before. That was the final sign. My gut screamed, "Leave!" I scrambled backward, abandoning stealth, legs rubbery. Reaching the corridor, I broke into a desperate sprint, breath tearing raggedly from my lungs. I burst out into the rank alleyway, my phone finally dying in my hand. The cool night air shocked my sweat-soaked skin. I didn't stop running until I reached a familiar, brightly lit street corner. For a time, I couldn't force myself back. Yet even in my absence, a strange yearning persisted, an inexplicable magnetism. Part of me, the part I refused to acknowledge in daylight, wanted to return, to witness the full manifestation, to comprehend the impossible reality housed within that decaying shell. Each descending dusk brought thoughts of the hiss, the spectral lights, the rusted visage. It felt like a summons, an invitation to claim a seat on that phantom carriage. My rational mind labeled it perilous, insane. But some deeper instinct responded whenever a distant bus released its brakes, a Pavlovian flinch toward the abyss. Now I find myself wandering the nocturnal streets again, aimless until exhaustion weighs down my limbs. Inevitably, my gaze drifts towards the derelict depot, perpetually scanning for that telltale glow, that pneumatic sigh, the harbinger of arrival. The chain link still stands sentinel, the barbed wire still glints menacingly. But I know about the compromised door tucked away in the alley. I know the way in, and if I'm honest, a treacherous part of me yearns to use that knowledge. Every time I pass, my heart accelerates. I half expect to see headlights cleave the darkness, followed by the protesting squeal of tires, the loud exhalation of compressed air. It never fully materializes, yet the portents remain. The shifting graffiti, the erratic flickers, the palpable emptiness that feels paradoxically full. I cannot shake the conviction that something waits behind those shattered panes, observing, patient, ready to issue its sibilant warning, or perhaps its welcome. I don't know how much longer my resolve will hold. Each night I linger a moment more, listening for the ghostly breaks that never quite engage, pushing my luck, certainly, but another part, insistent and cold, refuses to walk away. There's this inexorable pull to discover if that bus will ever truly arrive, if a door will groan open, if the urge to climb aboard will become irresistible. Thus far, it remains tantalizingly beyond reach, but with every passing night, the tingling certainty returns, the cold sweat tracing my neck, reminding me that it's there, waiting, and I suspect, deep down, that eventually I will step inside. Perhaps I already know I must. Dust motes drift like spectral pollen in the cone of light clamped between my teeth. Here, swallowed by the attic's gloom, the rasp of my own breathing feels like a violation against the sepulchral quiet. Even now, awake when I should be lost to sleep, my mouth is desert dry, the down on my forearms erect, charged with an energy that doesn't belong to me. Elbow deep in a crate spilling brittle newspapers and tarnished ironmongery, I inhale the cloying perfume of aged timber and mildew. It's barely been days since I fled the clamor of the city, the roar of the freeway outside my old apartment window, seeking refuge here. Yet this house, this supposed sanctuary, already exerts a pressure behind my eyes, a low thrumming insistence that arrival was profound error. The estate agent, Ms. Albright, had been brisk, waving away concerns with practiced ease when I first viewed the place. Decrepit, yes. The last occupant, vanished, perhaps deceased. Details remained hazy, lost in professional vagueness, but the terms were irresistible, and the need for severance from my past, absolute. A tremor of doubt should have sounded when I first clocked the leprous peel of wallpaper flanking the stairs, the drunken tilt of the chandelier in the main room. The structure possessed an unnerving emptiness, less a home than the shed husk of one. Now I find myself drawn to the attic, drawn specifically away from a shrouded form hulking in the far corner. My gaze keeps snagging on it. Earlier, preoccupied with assembling a makeshift bed downstairs, unpacking the barest necessities, I'd registered its presence, tall, man-shaped, draped in a dingy off-white sheet. A large canvas, I'd thought, or perhaps a cheval glass. I left it undisturbed. Tonight, however, was different, sleep fractured by a sound directly overhead, a delicate creak, subtle yet distinct. Heart fluttering like a trapped bird, I ascended the narrow attic stairs, propelled by a need for rational explanation. A warped window sash, timbers settling into ancient rhythms. but breaching the attic door felt like passing through a membrane into denser air, a space that seemed to hold its breath. My flashlight's beam jittered across rafters webbed with time, skeletal furniture huddled under dust. Then, the sound again. A faint, protracted straining, so soft it might have been the floorboard sighing under shifting temperatures. Yet it felt directed, a whisper coaxing me deeper. A difficult swallow. The sheeted enigma occupies the far corner, partially screened by a barricade of defunct chairs. Ignoring it is no longer an option. My legs are leaden, my palms slick. I traverse the dusty floorboards and reach for the cloth's upper edge. It yields with a soft tearing sound, unleashing a cloud of gray particulates that sting my eyes and throat. I cough, scrubbing at my vision. Revealed beneath is a mirror, vast and imposing, leaning against the plaster. Its wooden frame bears intricate, unsettling carvings, part floral, part something else, chipped and eroded by years. The glass itself is imperfect, subtly undulating, marred by a thin crack running diagonally near the top. I turn the flashlight onto my own face, leaning into the reflection. Pallid skin, eyes bruised with fatigue. Normal enough, but behind my mirrored self, something else resides. A presence, a shape. Closer inspection suggests not a flaw in the silvering, not a smear of grime, but a figure standing just beyond my shoulder in the reflected space. Indistinct, topped by what seems a broad-brimmed hat pulled low. The eyes are abyssal sockets. I spin, sweeping the light behind me. Nothing but stacked chairs, a steamer trunk thick with dust. Turning back to the mirror, the figure remains steadfast, impossibly close, an intimate phantom. My throat constricts. A tremor begins in my left hand. I waggle the flashlight, searching for the trick of light, the optical illusion. The reflected presence holds its ground, unmoving. Its face remains obscured, yet I feel an unnerving certainty. It is smiling, or possesses the chilling intention of one. Snatching the sheet, I fling it back over the glass and stumble towards the attic stairs, the planks groaning under my panicked retreat. Downstairs, sprawled on the thin mattress, I lie rigid, breath shallow, awaiting the dawn. Each time my eyelids flutter closed, the figure materializes behind me in the darkness of my mind. The house's silence has thickened, pressing like thumbs against my eardrums. Daylight brings a fragile attempt at reason. The attic's poor illumination, the mirror's antique distortions. Surely I'd seen my own silhouette warped, misconstrued. Around noon, steeling myself, I climb back up. The air hangs heavy, warm. I pull the sheet away again, half-braced for immediate confrontation. But the glass returns only my own image. Silas, hunched, blinking sweat from his lashes. I study my face, older than I care to admit, stubble shading my jaw. Yet something isn't right. The beard seems agitated, certain hairs twisting at angles independent of the rest. I smooth my hand over my chin. The reflection's hand lags, a fractional, sickening delay before it mimics the gesture. Ice water floods my veins. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. Leaning closer, my nose nearly touching the cool glass, I trace the faint crack bisecting my reflected forehead. And then, staring deep into my own mirrored eyes, I perceive it again. The shape, fainter now, but still there, hovering behind my shoulder. A presence that has no right to exist. I recoil. The sheet goes back on. a fleeting impulse to destroy its surfaces. But how? It's enormous, unwieldy. Drag it outside, leave it for refuse collection? An internal resistance, sharp and visceral, stays my hand. Overreaction, I tell myself, forcing my thoughts towards mundane tasks. Sorting cutlery, retrieving junk mail from the box outside. The world beyond the gate seems blessedly ordinary, yet an itch persists at the base of my skull all day. Evening finds me bone-weary. Sleep beckons early. The mattress on the floorboards offers little comfort. I leave the bedside lamp burning. Just as consciousness begins to fray, it comes. The same soft creak from the attic, that gentle, insistent summons. My pulse quickens its frantic rhythm. I twist, turn, sheets dampening with cold sweat. Near midnight, a phantom sound brushes my hearing. A smothered laugh, mirth choked behind a thick door. I bolt upright, breath sawing in my dry throat, the air tasting of rust and decay. I have to check. This time, gripping a hammer, feeling profoundly foolish, I rise. The attic door swings inward without a sound. The sheet veiling the mirror ripples faintly, though no draft stirs the stagnant air. Slowly, deliberately, I approach and wrench the covering down. My reflection regards me, waxen, hollowed out, and it has changed. My beard is visibly longer on the left side, the hairs coiling into grotesque spirals. My left eye droops, aged decades in mere hours. I touch my actual cheek. It feels normal, but the image in the glass is warped, distorted, and then its lips part in a slight, predatory smile. My own remain tightly sealed. It is smiling for me. I stagger backward, breath catching in ragged gasps. The figure behind me is there again, closer now, its outline sharpening. The hat, the eyes like charred pits. At my reflection's face twitches, contorting in silent, manic laughter. I could swear its shoulder shifts, an inclination towards the phantom beside it, as if preparing to link arms. I whirl around, hammer raised high. Empty space greets me, just dust and dereliction. I throw the sheet back over the mirror and flee, stumbling down the stairs, collapsing onto a kitchen chair, head clutched in my hands, heart hammering against my ribs. Escape. I must leave this place. But the thought is immediately countered by stark reality. Nowhere to go, funds depleted by this very purchase. Who would I even call in the dead of night? Logic dictates waiting for morning. Perhaps I can shatter the mirror then? Yes, pulverize it. Yet the mere thought triggers a wave of nausea so intense my stomach clenches. Breaking the glass, unleashing whatever festers behind it, the prospect is paralyzing. Sweat beads on my forehead. I gulp water straight from the tap, the coolness a fleeting balm. Returning to my makeshift bed, sleep remains elusive. Every groan of the old house translates into a footstep. My scalp prickles. The mocking, altered face of my reflection burns behind my eyelids. An indeterminate time later, I slip into a shallow, dream-troubled doze. Morning seeps grayly through the grimy panes. I feel leaden, muscles aching as if from nocturnal struggles. In the small bathroom mirror above the sink, my face appears ordinary, exhausted, yes, but mine. No distorted beard, no sunken eye. A shaky laugh escapes me. Relief, fragile and tentative. Perhaps it was all suggestion, exhaustion playing tricks. Resolved, I return to the attic, this time armed with a heavy blanket. The plan? Wrap the mirror, haul it downstairs, stow it in the garage, banish it. Sunlight lances through the dusty air, illuminating the quiet space. Carefully, I peel back the sheet. My heart seizes. My reflection stares back. The figure isn't immediately visible behind me, but my reflection's eyes look dead, the surrounding flesh sunken as if decayed overnight. My beard, smooth to my own touch, appears mange-ridden in the glass, patchy and wrong. My reflection cocks its head, trailing my actual movement by a chilling half-second. Bile rises in my throat. Sweat slicks my palms, prickles the nape of my neck. I reach out, pressing fingertips against the glass. It's cold, an invasive chill that bites. For an infinitesimal moment I feel resistance, something pressing back from the other side. My reflection's mouth stretches into a silent rictus of laughter. I snatch my hand away as if burned. The floorboards creak, louder this time, and I sense movement just beyond my peripheral vision. I dare not turn. Staring fixedly into the mirror, I see it. The hat, the deep-set eyes, materializing at the edge of the frame, drawing nearer. My reflection is trapped between me and it. Or perhaps I am trapped between them. My heart pounds violently. Smash it now? What if the entity simply steps through the broken shards? Run? How could I ever be free? Action is imperative. My hand trembles as I grasp the thick blanket, breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The figure is inches away in the reflection now, looming behind my distorted visage. I can almost feel its icy breath on my neck. I lunge, throwing the blanket over the mirror's surface. The instant the glass is obscured, a profound silence descends upon the attic. The creaking stops. I heave the mirror away from the wall, sending a stack of chairs clattering. Dust chokes me. The mirror is heavier than anticipated, and as I tilt it, preparing to move it, a faint scraping sound emanates from beneath the blanket, like fingernails dragged across glass. I nearly drop it, shaking uncontrollably, vision swimming. Step by agonizing step, I wrestle the shrouded burden down the narrow attic stairs, each tread groaning under the weight. Reaching the ground floor hallway offers a surge of Pyrrhic victory. I lean the blanket-wrapped mirror against the wall near the garage door. My pulse still races, but distance feels like a temporary reprieve. Perhaps tomorrow, the dump. Yet the thought of uncovering it again, of seeing my own face made monstrous, of confirming the presence behind it, fills me with visceral dread. Night descends like a shroud. I force down cold soup from a can, tasteless ash in my mouth. The silence presses in, suffocating. Before retreating to my room, I pass through the hallway, giving the covered mirror a wide berth. It stands sentinel, mute. I wake later, plunged in darkness to that soft laughter, still soundless, yet vibrating deep within my bones. My hands shake violently. Pushing the bedroom door open a fraction, I peer into the dim hall. Streetlight filters weakly through a window, sketching the mirror's outline beneath its blanket. Does it seem taller now, leaning forward, as if listening intently? My stomach churns. Driven by a compulsion I cannot name, I approach on cautious feet. I reach out, placing a hand flat against the cloth. The surface beneath is unnaturally cold. I feel a subtle pressure pushing outward, a faint convexity. The crack in the glass. I remember its precise location. Has it widened? Lifting the blanket's edge by a mere inch, I glimpse darkness within. An eye stares back. My eye, my reflection's eye, but hideously misplaced, offset, sliding towards the frame's edge. And behind it, the curve of a hat brim, a rictus grin sketched in shadow, waiting for a moment of weakness, a lapse in vigilance, to initiate the exchange. I let the cloth fall. My breathing is ragged. I cannot destroy it. I cannot look at it. I cannot leave it here. Blood pounds in my ears. Backing away, I stumble into my room, closing the door, slumping to the floor, sweat tracing cold paths down my spine. Safety is an illusion. My other self is in there, behind the blanket, twisted and silently laughing. Even now, through the solid wood of the door, I imagine I see the faint glimmer of glass, its malevolent presence bleeding through the walls. My skin crawls. I rub my cheeks, desperate for reassurance, feeling for any textural change. They feel normal, but when I flick on the lamp and risk a glance in my small travel mirror, I swear my beard has an odd asymmetry. One eye seems infinitesimally sunken. I snap the mirror shut, heart hammering. The night stretches taut, infinite. Sleep is unthinkable. Periodically, the gentle creak returns, a siren call from the attic, or perhaps the dry whisper of fingernails exploring the confines of their shroud. And somewhere, just beyond sight, my reflection waits, hungry, patient, poised to seize the moment my guard finally drops. Resistance feels finite. For now, I sit here, trembling in the lamplight, heart a frantic drum, praying that the encroaching dawn holds enough power to keep it contained, just for one more day. The small hours were deepening, perhaps 2 in the morning, perhaps later still, when Elias found himself anchored to his desk. His makeshift office, a spare room claimed by work, blazed under the glare of every available light, a personal bulwark against the shadows he disliked. Spread across the table, documents formed a chaotic archipelago around the cool glow of his laptop screen. His back, turned resolutely towards the window, faced the unlit expanse behind the house. He rarely bothered with the blinds. Nothing but shrubs, fencing, and an indifferent darkness occupied that space. A stretch, a lean back in the worn office chair, and his gaze drifted momentarily to the window pane. His own reflection stared back, tired but familiar, and behind it, superimposed, was another, something else, humanoid, yes, but utterly alien. Elias froze, breath caught in his throat. A frantic drumbeat commenced against his ribs. He spun around, chair scraping harshly against the floor. Nothing. The room stood empty, bathed in the stark, unwavering light. His eyes darted. The vacant chair behind him offered no answers. Boxes huddled innocently in the corner. A quick, nonsensical check under the table, behind the solid wood of the closed door, yielded only emptiness. He turned back to the window, slowly, dread coiling in his stomach. It was still there. In the reflection, directly behind his mirrored image, stood the shape, a silhouette carved from shadow, utterly still, perhaps a hand's breadth taller than himself. No face resolved itself from the darkness, just a stark outline, shoulders, head, the posture of standing presence. Elias stared, mesmerized, trying to force detail where none existed. No hint of fabric, no texture of hair, no discernible features, merely a form mimicking humanity, solid and undeniable in the glass. His own reflection was sharp, clear. The desk, the chair, the room meticulously rendered. And behind him, the silent watcher. Yet the physical space remained stubbornly vacant when he faced it directly. Unease tightened its grip. He rose, his mouth suddenly parched. Drawn by a morbid curiosity, he approached the window, confronting the reflection head-on. He attempted to align himself with his mirrored image. The figure in the glass held its position, perpetually situated just behind where he would be seated. His hand reached out, fingers pressing against the cool, smooth pane. Was something clinging to the exterior? He peered into the blackness beyond, scanning the vague shapes of the shrubs. Nothing. Back to the reflection. The presence persisted. A constriction formed in his chest. "Calm down," he commanded himself, the words hollow. There must be an explanation. He pivoted again, a slow, deliberate rotation this time, scrutinizing every inch of the room. Silence, but for the low hum of the laptop fan and the faint electrical buzz from a desk lamp bulb. The rest of the house slept soundly. There was simply nowhere for a person to conceal themselves. The boxes were undisturbed, the walls solid and impassive under his hesitant touch. He felt a fool, running his hand along plaster as if expecting it to yield. Of course, no one was there. A few steps back, and his eyes were drawn again to the window. The same tableau. Elias, his office, the dark sentinel behind him. He waved a hand experimentally before his face. His reflection mimicked the gesture perfectly. The figure remained utterly static. He sidestepped left, then right. The silhouette shifted in the reflection, maintaining its relative position, always just behind him, slightly offset, as if observing, yet possessed of no visible means to do so. Impulse took over. He needed to disrupt the conditions. Elias located the wall switch and flicked it, plunged into near darkness, save for the laptop's lingering luminescence. His eyes struggled to adjust. In the dim, ghostly reflection still visible, the shape endured, a deeper void against the gloom. He flipped the switch back on, a wave of nausea washing over him. He stood there, adrift, uncertain. His phone felt heavy in his hand. Capture it, perhaps? Proof that this wasn't some trick of tired eyes. He unlocked the screen, aimed the camera towards the window, focused on the glass. Click. Click. He reviewed the images. His own reflection, pale and wide-eyed, the window frame stark against the night. But no figure. It refused photographic capture. More attempts, different angles, yielded the same frustrating result. Visible to his eyes alone, stubbornly persistent in the reflective plane. His heart hammered, sweat beaded on his palms. He wiped them uselessly on his trousers. His breathing grew shallow, catching in his throat. Stay calm, think. Leaving the room seemed the only sane option. He pulled the office door open, stepping into the relative safety of the hallway, leaving the lights burning within. From the threshold, he peered back. The room appeared normal. Desk, chair, boxes, the window at the far end. And faintly, visible even from this distance, the reflection held its silent passenger, waiting behind his unoccupied place. Down the hallway, into the living room. More lights flicked on, chasing shadows. He paced, thoughts racing. The absurdity of calling the authorities about a spectral reflection stopped him cold. They'd assume intoxication, delusion. He was neither, just working, sober, and unnerved. A glass of water from the kitchen, cold against his lips, splashed onto his face. A momentary shock that cleared little. Back he went, compelled, to the hallway's vantage point. Still there, he needed another angle. Elias slipped out the front door into the cool night air, the chill raising goosebumps on his bare arms. He circled the house, footsteps quiet on the dry ground, searching for tracks, any sign of disturbance near the office window. Nothing. Reaching the window, he peered in from the outside. Just his office, brightly lit, inanimate. No figure stood within the room itself. No anomaly. A light tap on the glass from the outside produced no effect. The yard was still, the fence line unbroken. A distant car murmured on the main road. He retreated indoors, the click of the lock sounding unnaturally loud. The nervousness intensified, feeding on the lack of explanation. Back in the office, the window drew his gaze inexorably. The figure remained. He experimented with position. Near the desk, it loomed behind him in the glass. Closer to the window, it stayed put, always behind. Moving to the far left or right of the room caused the reflection's shadow to adjust, maintaining its constant relative angle. It never initiated movement, never tilted its head or lifted a hand, a static effigy of dread. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. A dull ache began behind his eyes. What was this thing? Logic scrabbled for purchase, an external object casting an odd shadow, a trick of layered reflections, but the yard was empty, the darkness uniform. No external light source could sculpt such a specific form. He touched the glass again, fingertips tracing the cold surface, seeking imperfections. Smooth, unblemished. He regulated his breathing, fighting panic. He studied his own reflected face, eyes, nose, mouth, the fabric of his shirt. All accurate, mundane, except for the impossible companion sharing his reflection, tethered to nothing in the physical room. Enough! He yanked the cord, letting the blinds cascade down, a white barrier erasing the glass and its phantom image. A wave of relief washed over him, fragile and temporary. If he raised them again? He waited, listening to his own ragged breath in the sudden stillness. Sleep felt distant, impossible. The not knowing gnawed. He had to look. Slowly, cautiously, he lifted the edge of the blinds. The reflection reformed. The figure stood, patient, unmoved, waiting. His hands trembled. He sank back into his chair, now facing the covered window, yet seeing the image burned behind his eyelids. A foolish impulse made him whisper into the quiet room. "Hello?" Silence answered. Only the laptop's whir, the electric thrum. He killed the laptop screen, reducing glare. The reflection dimmed, but the shape persisted. He switched off the desk lamp. Lit now only by the overhead fixture, the figure remained visible, its presence indifferent to the lumens. Turning off all room lights, relying on the hallway's spill, only made it a darker stain against the dim reflection. Still there. A strange tension gripped him, the urge to flee warring with a primal need to comprehend. He grabbed a sheet of paper from the desk, holding it behind his back while watching the reflection. Would it obscure the figure? His mirrored self held the paper aloft. The silhouette remained whole, seemingly behind the paper, unaffected by the physical object. He stepped closer to the window until his reflection nearly filled the pane. Impossibly, the figure condensed, shifted, ensuring it remained visible behind him. Sweat broke out on his forehead. He swiped at it with his sleeve. His breathing hitched. Down came the blinds again, decisively this time. He wouldn't look, not again tonight. He backed away, switched off the light, and exited the room. But standing in the hallway, the silence pressed in. One more check. He cracked the door, raised the blind a fraction. Still there. He let it snap shut. A knot formed in his throat. His phone felt useless. Who could he call at this hour, and what would he say? "There's a ghost in my window, but only in the reflection, and only behind me." He wasn't hallucinating. He felt the floor solid beneath his feet, the cool air on his skin. The anomaly was localized, terrifyingly specific. From the kitchen, he retrieved a small flashlight. Back in the office, he played its beam across the covered window, then lifted the blinds again. The light illuminated dust motes on the glass, faint smudges, nothing more. The figure absorbed the light, remained unchanged. Desperate now, he seized a large piece of cardboard from a packing box. Using tape, he secured it firmly over the entire window from the inside, obliterating the glass surface completely. He stared at the blank brown rectangle, half expecting the shape to bleed through. Just cardboard. He tapped it lightly. Knocked. Silence. He waited, listening intently. His own breathing, a faint ringing in his ears. Minutes passed. A measure of calm returned. Out of sight, out of mind, perhaps. He switched off the lights, left the office, locking the door. A meaningless, reflexive action. He retreated to the living room couch, tried to think of anything else, but the dark shape lingered in his mind's eye, passive, yet profoundly disturbing. Had he ever noticed anything like this before? Never. Tonight was different. Sleep was a distant shore. Would daylight banish it? Or would it remain, a permanent fixture in the glass? He rose, drawn back to the office door, pressed his ear against the wood. Nothing. He opened it, turned on the light. The cardboard held fast. He stood before it, hesitating, then peeled away the tape, lowering the barrier. He looked into the glass. His reflection materialized, and behind it, constant, unwavering, the figure remained. A shaky breath escaped him. It didn't leave. It didn't act. It just waited. Sweat trickled down his spine. His eyes felt raw. Blinds down. Cardboard up. He secured it more firmly this time. Left the room, closed the door. He would not look again tonight. Morning had to bring some change. In the living room, the television flickered on, volume low, a feeble shield against the silence. He lay on the couch, phone clutched tight. The clock showed nearly 3, too late to call anyone. He listened to the house settle around him, waiting for dawn, knowing that behind the locked door, behind the cardboard and blinds, the window held its impossible secret, inexplicable, immovable. He could only wait.